name's Elena Conn, and this is my Lessonface tutorial. Today I'd like to start by talking about practicing. One of the most important things when drummers are practicing, especially at the beginner level, is practicing your rudiments. Now, rudiments are the basic principles of drumming and playing. Just like pianists have their scales, and they're learning musicality and technique through their scales, drummers are learning their technique through their rudiments. And these rudiments make up many of the musical phrases that we're playing. They'll help us with the strength in our hands, they'll help us with our timing and how fast and slow we can play, and overall our general sense of control when we're playing the instrument. It's a very powerful tool to develop your sense of control and get your hands together. In addition to practicing them at fast and slow tempos, I also recommend practicing them at soft and loud volumes, and that's going to also target those muscle groups in your hand that are putting a lot of power into the drum or simply control when you're playing really quietly, which is a lot harder for most people. The first rudiment I'd like to talk about is the paradiddle, and everyone loves a good paradiddle. So a paradiddle looks like this. It's just right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. And we're gonna add an accent on the first note of each of the phrases, okay? And so I'm gonna alternate between the two hands. Right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. Okay, and then a little faster. 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 And really slow. And really quietly. And rudiments can also be, especially the paradiddle in particular, can be applied to the drum set in really cool ways. You're practicing what's called your stickings. So all rudiments have recommended hand stickings, which means it's determining whether you're using your left hand or your right hand when you go to hit a note. When we're playing phrases around the drum set, say I'm playing something really fast and I end up all the way over here, but within the next beat, say maybe even like a quarter note or eighth note later, I have to travel all the way back here. I want to end with the correct hand so that the hand that I need to come back over here is free in time for me to do that. So a lot of people end up using paradiddles within their phrasing around the drum set to create the stickings that they need, to create the space and the time for their hands to move freely. Okay, so rudiments are really great to be using around the drum set, especially those paradiddles. In addition to actually using sticks, I like to tell people to try playing rudiments with brushes. And playing rudiments with brushes will key you into the strength that you have and the physical ability you have to push the rudiments out of your hands, because it's going to be a lot harder to get the sound out physically with brushes. You need to apply more pressure, you need to apply more strength, and that'll really build those muscle groups in your hand. Another thing that can be really good to practice independence in addition to practicing your rudiments and getting your hands together is playing something with your feet at the same time while you're practicing these rudiments, right? So I'll demonstrate a little bass drum hi-hat ostinato that I like to use and that many drummers like to use while they're playing their rudiments. It goes like this. So now we'll add the paradiddle. All right, so that's the paradiddle with the bass drum and hi-hat ostinato. And that's what I'd recommend for rudiments. And beyond that, warming up and stretching actually or something, another thing that I think gets overlooked sometimes when you're practicing a lot. If you're sitting and practicing for hours at a time, especially with drums, you can get a lot of tension in your arms here where your joints meet, very similar to tennis elbows. So I'll always recommend stretching before, in the middle, if you're running through all of your rudiments, and at the end. So now I'd like to talk about sonic consistency and fluidity, which is something that's very important to me and I find has been something that I'm constantly thinking about as a drummer these days. I'm a big believer in really getting a great sound out of this instrument, just like any other instrument. You really want to have that tone and the pitch correct. But with our instrument, because there's no pitch, sometimes, especially at the beginner level, people actually overlook the need to get a great consistent sound out of this instrument. And the reason why I say that, especially now in this day and age, like 2019, we're hearing the sound of mastered or studio audio is very much controlled drums on a track or recording that at times is, and almost always, perfectly consistent, almost as if like one sound is on a loop, right? So what I like to really work on is creating consistency of sound. The way you want to do that is approach the instrument with intention. Each note should have intention. You should know exactly where you're about to hit the instrument with the stick, and become familiar with each part of the drum set. What sounds can I get out of the hi-hat? What sounds can I get out of the snare drum, the bass drum, the floor tom, and the cymbal, right? And some pieces will have a larger palette of sounds than others, like the floor tom may be a little limited, the bass drum a little limited too, but especially the ride cymbal, the hi-hat, and the snare drum, you're gonna have a big palette. So the way I'd recommend practicing this is just like you'd practice baseball or golf, like physically swinging at something and making accurate contact with whatever you're hitting. So once I've worked out the different sounds that I can hear and that I like on this ride cymbal, I'll sit there and practice each one, and I'll practice the attack, and I'll practice the consistency of my articulations. Okay, so that part of the cymbal is going to sound very different from other parts. And it'll also sound different depending on which part of the drumstick I'm going to use. Okay, so if I'm using this part of the drumstick on my ride cymbal, I know that actually doesn't sound very good. Here, take a listen. Yeah. People don't really like that high-pitched, sharp sound. So, and I don't either. So what I aim for with this ride cymbal in particular is if I really want to use that part of the stick, I'm going to be up here on the bell. That's where I can get the best sound out of the bell, I know, is by using that part of my stick, as opposed to with the tip. You're going to get a much wider sound. And then down here when I'm crashing on the ride, you can even see in my sticks like where I tend to hit the ride cymbal. It shows that I'm hitting it in the same place each time because I know exactly where that nice sound sits. Okay, it's going to be right here. Okay. And some ride cymbals you won't want to crash with. Maybe they're too dark or too low or too big and the sound isn't nice, but I really like crashing on my ride cymbal. So the next place is the hi-hat. When we're practicing the hi-hat, the same thing goes for the ride cymbal. You're going to really be thinking about the area of the drumstick that you're using and make sure you practice the consistency of hitting it in that same place in the same area of the stick. And then with the hi-hat, this also obviously involves your left foot. So you're creating consistency with the level that you're raising your foot, right? And that could go anywhere from like there to there, and that could create a major difference, major difference. Obviously based on the distance between the cymbals and how wide they are. The more open the cymbals are, the more washy and grainy the sound. It's gonna be harsh. I almost never use that sound, so I'm more here. Okay, and then up here. So then when we play a beat, you're just gonna play it over and over again, just like you'd hit a baseball over and over again. Versus maybe as the song gets bigger, So that's that with the hi-hat. And then with the snare drum, even when I'm sound checking at shows, I'll do this. Okay, those are 3 different sounds that I generally will use on every show. So play around with these different sounds, look at each drum and cymbal as a palette, and make a conscious decision of which type of sound you'd like to get out of each piece, and practice hitting these spots with clarity. This is Elena Conn. Thank you for watching my Lessonface tutorial. If you're interested in taking some lessons with me or learning more about what I do, please visit my profile on lessonface.com.